for a keynote session that is being organized on Pakistan's early stage space program. And for that instance, हमारे साथ आज मौजूद हैं Dr. Tariq Mustafa, a renowned space scientist. It is an honor for us to host legendary Dr. Tariq Mustafa at NICAD. Dr. Tariq Mustafa led 5 team members responsible for pioneering program of Rocket, the first rocket launched by SUPARCO on 7th June 1962 in collaboration with NASA. Global Lieutenant Professor Dr Salam was the pioneer of this program. हम प्रोग्राम का बाकायदा आगाज करेंगे and I would like to call Dr. Tariq Mustafa on stage. Big round of applause.
The notable thing is that today you will hear from a person who had the good fortune to be associated with the inception of SUPARCO from day one. Because, of course, you know that Professor Dr Salam was involved, but I have been with him in all his meetings with NASA from day one. So you are going to listen from the horse's mouth, if you like. Okay, ji. Now a little bit about the background of rocketry. As you are all aware, rockets are based basically on gunpowders, which was something which the Chinese had discovered, but basically for fireworks. What we were surprised to learn was that actually Tipu Sultan's days, in the year 1800, he had a rocket corps of 5,000 people. And this I learned when Professor Salam and myself walked into the reception room of NASA. There was a big picture about Tipu Sultan. So this is something which we had not known, and I don't think many people in Pakistan are aware of that. Then, of course, everybody has heard about V2, but things started moving in the modern direction with the Sputnik. The West was shaken when the Russians managed to launch Sputnik into orbit. This was the very first satellite, 57, and then this was followed amazingly by a man in orbit, Yuri Gagarin. I was then in UK. The Americans and the British simply did not believe till they had to believe. And the result was that many people started learning the Russian language, including myself. I spent 1 month, spasiba and all that, and then I couldn't keep up, so I left it. But the point was that it shook the West, and Americans then came up with their own program, the Apollo program to the moon. Their idea was, all right, if you want to race, let's see who can manage that. And thus the space race began, you see. Now, who is Tariq Mustafa and how did he get involved? We'll learn a little bit about that. But I was educated in Lalpur, won government and university scholarships, and I was lucky that the government college principal gave me the certificate of being the best sportsman and scholar. But the thing to note is that sportsman comes first. The scholarly part is secondary. And I saw an ad for apprenticeship at the Royal Arsenal in Britain. And it was a 5-year thing. And it also offered that those who could manage it could register in London University for a mechanical engineering course. I didn't inquire from my dad or my mother, and I applied and got selected because I couldn't resist this opportunity. So I ended up at the Royal Arsenal. That was, and by that time, this was my sports career. There is hockey, that was my principal. This is the Pakistan High Commission team. As soon as I reached London, I had been playing for Government College, Punjab University, Punjab Province, so news had kind of reached there and I was drafted. Billiards was also my game, but we can move on. And after the 5-year apprenticeship, in which I happened to be declared 3 times the best apprentice of the year, this was a lot of British and Pakistani crowd. I managed to get a first-class honours degree in mechanical engineering along with my apprenticeship. Now I was told by the coordination officer there that in the apprenticeship scheme I was the first one to get a first-class honours. And again, as luck would have it, 1957, an ad appeared in the Pakistan Embassy's handout that there is an Atomic Energy Commission had been formed back home. Professor Salam was a member of that commission, honorary member. By that time he had come back to Government College, gone back to Cambridge, done very well there, and he had moved to Imperial College as a full professor. So that they were holding interviews at the embassy to find good Pakistanis for the atomic energy. So I appeared for that interview. That was my first meeting with Professor Salam, first of many. He was 7 years older. I knew all about him, but he naturally had never met me. But in that interview where there was the ambassador as well as a Professor Hill, because they had started nuclear energy courses at Imperial College. Till that time, there were no courses in the institutions on nuclear energy. And again, I was lucky to do well in that interview, so much so that Professor Salam told me there and then, he said, "You are taken." I was the only one out of the 17 people who had been invited. But this is just to show that we met in 1957, and from then onwards our contact was quite frequent, both in Karachi, where the Atomic Energy Commission was, as well as in UK, where the atomic energy people then passed me on to the first international course on nuclear energy at Harwell. Harwell is the British establishment. And then I think we saw a picture earlier. That was the first international course. And again, I happened to be the youngest participant. I was then, I think, 23 years old, you see. So from there I went to the Calder Hall power station. This was the first British nuclear power station. Now I am giving you all this background just to tell you, because what happened later on, it will make sense, you see, how Professor Salam could have confidence in a youngster when the opportunity came. Okay, so after this atomic energy courses, Professor Salam and Dr Usmani, chairman of the Atomic Energy Commission, they were like two bradaran. They thought alike, supported each other. They came to the conclusion that these short 3 months or 6 month courses for a new field like atomic energy is not good enough. You have to send people on long assignments. So by that time, the United States had also opened up under Eisenhower, and there were fellowships available. So again, I was lucky to get one of those fellowships, 2 years, at the Oak Ridge National Labs. This is the premier US lab, and I was there, and later on you will see Salim Mahmood in electronics was also, he was doing a formal course, I was working on reactors, you see. So that is when the Apollo program was announced by Kennedy, and it so happened that President Ayub had been invited by Kennedy to visit USA, 1961 now. And Professor Dr Salam by then had become the chief scientific advisor to Ayub, so he was accompanying him. And I happened to be, and Salim, in Oak Ridge National Labs. Now this is the scenario while the Americans were busy on their Apollo program, and they realized that Indian Ocean was a black hole of upper atmospheric data. The Apollo rocket has first to be put into orbit around the Earth, and that needed information, not just winds, but there is something what we call wind shears. It was learned that, atmosphere can move at 100 or even 200 miles an hour. You must have noticed that planes going in one direction, say from here to London, may take 9 or 10 hours, but in the other direction, they can take much shorter, you see. Now that is because of the winds. And they impose stresses on the structure. So one needs to know this. And for that, there are different experiments which we'll see. Sodium experiment and grenade chaff experiments. So NASA needed information on the Indian Ocean. And they announced that any country around the Indian Ocean, if they are willing to cooperate, NASA will assist them. Now, our luck was that the President was there, Salam Sahab was there, we happened to be in Oak Ridge, so we could react very quickly, which we did. That was the advantage that Pakistan had, and we took full advantage from that, you see. And I received a call in Oak Ridge, which is almost 1,000 miles from Washington. Other end, Salam Sahab was there. He said, Tariq, you have to join me in an important meeting tomorrow morning. I don't care if you have to run all night, but be here for the meeting. Because he had been invited by NASA. Now that's President Ayub. I think we've spoken about this. And now, so I joined him in that meeting with the Director International Programs and he came straight to the point, typical American method, get a cup of coffee and then come to the business. And he said that we need data over Indian Ocean, what I've just explained. Salam Sahab was very fond of speaking Punjabi, not Urdu. So I was sitting next to him, he said, Tariq, ki khayal hai? So, Tariq, what do you think of the proposal? And my reaction was, कि जी ये तो साडा ख्वाब पूरा हो जाएगा. Our dream would come true. Now the director Frutkin was watching. He didn't let Professor Salam speak. He said, if I am not wrong, the young man seems keen. Then Salam Sahab nodded. And you look at the speed at which NASA was working. Director looked at his watch. He said, it's 10:13 now. The meeting started at 10. And he said, a NASA plane leaves Washington National Airport at 1 o'clock. We'll put the young man on the plane. I will instruct the range to be kept open. That's about an hour away on the Atlantic. He will be shown around. He will spend the night at the plant. He will catch the same plane back to Washington, 8 o'clock in the morning. And we hope that he'll come back with a report. So you can see their speed. And we worked like that. I was shown around very courteously. I didn't sleep that night. And next morning I came back. with that 3-page report. Again, second meeting, their director and Salam Sahib and myself, and the director had obviously received a favorable report from their own side that yes, Pakistanis seem to know what they are talking about and they will be able to do the job. So it was agreed, my report was looked at, that the report will be taken to President Ayub. Salam Sahib did that, and the President, in fact, he told me that he was happy with that report. He said, look, it's concise, business-like. It covered selection of the team, it covered training, it covered where the equipment will come from. All that stemmed out of the discussions. What was the team? Salim and myself happened to be in Oak Ridge already. So we got 3 other people from Pakistan. Farooqi is on the left. He was a retired flight lieutenant from the Air Force, but education, not a technical. He was electronics, communications. Then next is Mr. Rahmatullah. Mr. Farooqi unfortunately passed away fairly early. Rahmatullah, he was deputy director of meteorology. So he was supposed to look after the wind patterns and all that, you see. Myself as the team leader, Salim Mahmood, the electronics, subsequently became the guidance and control specialist, and chairman SUPARCO, you probably know him. And then Sikandar Zaman, mechanical engineer, he also later on became chairman SUPARCO. So this was a very versatile, dedicated but a small team, unlike the Indians who came in with, I don't know, a 20 or 30 man team. But then they had big plans, I think. You see the rocket at the back, it's a 2-stage rocket. We can't go into the details, unfortunately. But the interesting thing was that when President Ayub approved that report, the main thing was, where will the range be established? It has to be on the sea, so that the rockets fall into the sea. It has to be on the Indian Ocean. So Ayub said that look at Sonmiani, it's a place in Balochistan, not far from Karachi. There is already an army artillery range. So that was, the president approved the project and he guided us to Sonmiani. These 2 decisions meant an accelerated start for the program. There was no need for a PC-1 and going through FAs and all that, not nonsense, but the procedures, you see. So this was the reason why we could jumpstart the program and go ahead of all Muslim countries and developing countries. Because otherwise, simply to choose a range, a place for the range, and especially if the army is involved, it's a bureaucratic process. But these were the advantages we could manage to milk, you see. Now, coming to equipment procurement, for example. Now, NASA was not going to help us with new equipment. They were also clever. They had received from the American Defense Forces a lot of surplus missile systems. And one of them was a Nike Ajax anti-aircraft system. And they had built this, the booster is a Nike booster. The rocket is a civilian rocket. And they put us to work, not just teaching and training us, but I remember that I was given a code, a telephone and a desk, and a register of all these surplus equipment locations. And I was supposed to call them up, inquire which part was lying where, use that code as an authority, and ask them to send that equipment to Wallops Island. So this is how within about 4 months we managed to collect all the parts of the system required. And in that the US side was very generous. Because once that code was available, nobody asked you whether you really needed this or not. Everything worked, luckily for us. Even the American side was surprised how a range could be built. We were lucky, as I said, artillery range already existed. And although we were a small team, I think we were a versatile team. We managed this, and the first Rebels could be launched almost in time, 7th of June 1962. Why the date was important? Because meteorological department had told us that with plus and minus 1 day, the monsoon clouds reached Karachi. And actually we were a day late in the first rocket. The clouds had come, and we had to, the sodium vapor experiment, which we'll touch upon, it is that at the top of the rocket there is no payload, but you'll see, we put a payload, a sodium payload, and as the rocket is fired, when it goes beyond 50 kilometers, the sodium in it is vaporized and it leaves a trail. You'll see a photograph later. And it is that trail that you photograph from camera stations strung about 100 kilometers around the site, at least 3 of them. We had 4 sites, so that there is one extra at Bolari, Ormara, Karachi Airport, and at Somniani itself. Now, the important thing is that these photographs have to be synchronized. They have to be taken at precisely to 1 second, same time, same exposure. So a communication system has to be set up between the range and these. That was Farooqi's job. And the Air Force helped, because the Air Force had the cameras for surveillance and so on. And we reversed their role. Instead of looking down, we looked up. So we had an Air Force team assisting us, and we trained them. But the charge here was clearly that a civilian in charge, not the other way around. Actually. So you can get the hang of it. How did Professor Salam had this much confidence? And what I have not touched on yet is, it was the resources of the Atomic Energy Commission. There was no SUPARCO. There was no budget. Everything came out of the budget of the Atomic Energy Commission. That is where Dr. Usmani's assistance helped, and the two worked together like clockwork, and we could, all of our staff, the 5 people that you saw, the 4 at least, one was meteorology department, the 4 were from the Atomic Energy Commission. So Usmani Salam, we call them the Usmani Salam Bradaran, because they actually were like that. And this was the team, actually. Later on you will see not only the range, we decided to start manufacture of these rockets in the country, and a plant was to be built. But now the position was a little different. There was no longer American cooperation for that purpose. In fact, the Americans asked us, why do you want to build rockets locally? We will supply you as many rockets as you wish, so long as we keep on getting the results. But our Pakistan's interests are our own interests, you see. We decided, and then these 3 went around which countries would share technology against, if you like, the wishes of the core Western countries. And it turned out that Japan and France, they were both willing, for their own reason. De Gaulle had an independent policy for France. So we took advantage of that. Our choice was on the French. French technology was definitely at that time superior to the Japanese. So we made a number of trips, 3 of us, to Tokyo and to Paris. And finally, the decision fell in favor of At that time there was Sud Aviation, South Aviation. It was their design, we'll just touch upon that, and service the Poudre, the French explosive service. We signed a licenses with them and had a second team. But of course the problem there was French language. So 6 months course here in Karachi, followed by another 6 months course in Besançon in France, because I insisted that we will send these people to the shops and they must know the language so that they can relate to the workers. That's how you learn. I'm sure Rastgar Sahab would understand that without language, simply having the French gave me an interpreter, that was all right. I was a coordinator. But all my team members had to learn French like a local almost. I said, otherwise you go back. Now this is a picture of Louvre in the background. I was posted 2 years in Paris on the left. My dear wife who has passed away, may I say, we never had a quarrel all our life. Not one. Not that we didn't have a quarrel, but by the time night came, it had been resolved. So what a great woman she was. Acha ji, so Salam Sahib is here visiting us in Paris. Unfortunately, picture has gone sour. Now here is the sodium cloud and the rocket. Upper photograph, you see the rocket going up 50 to 200 kilometers depending on what the experiment is. And you release, this is a sodium vapor trail, you see that, which is photographed as I said. And that's the, and here is a picture of the sodium cloud. Along with that, there are different experiments. You can do the same thing with a grenade experiment. You release grenades which are exploded at every 20 seconds or 30 seconds, and you record their sound waves. Again, there is an array of mics, and from the sounds which arrive at different times, you can work back what the wind patterns are. And then there is this chaff cloud, the chaff launches. These are copper chaff. This is a cheap experiment, but a very effective one. You launch a rocket which releases a cloud of chaff, and you now let it drift with the winds, and you have a radar to track it. Now mind it, this is 1960, mid-60s. But the radar that you need is not the usual surveillance radar which you see with the Air Force and at airports and so on and so forth. At that time, such a tracking radar, this is this kind of a radar, it locks on and you track the object. This was the first tracking radar in Pakistan that SUPARCO managed to get for the chaff experiment. So, we had at the back of our mind aims beyond. So, later on you will see, in 71, Indo-Pakistan war, missile boat attacks, and then this radar came in very handy. We put it on Manora, and now with its tracking radar, its high energy beam, we could see, in fact you get over the horizon coverage up to a point. So, but the point was, this was something new, Navy loved it, and Navy decided on acquiring a number of such radars subsequently, and the first defense system of Karachi was born out of, and Salim was the technical advisor, and we'll talk about other issues also. I'm going ahead of myself. Here is a missile boat, the OSA Missile Boat, which gave a lot of trouble to Pakistan Navy. Navy was ill prepared to meet. It's a small boat, but it's a mighty boat with OSA sticks, Russian missiles. This can hit a ship at beyond 20 miles for which at that time, 71, there was no defense. And the Navy, I dare say, was not wise in attempting the old, what they call a border patrol, send ships outside Karachi which are doing this patrolling. The Indians got two of our ships, a destroyer and a minesweeper. And Pakistan Navy didn't know what hit them. Again, I can't release the full details. A warning had been given by us to them. This is such a powerful boat that 4 years before, I think it was 67, the Egyptians had bought these boats from the Soviets. This is a Soviet boat. And the Egyptian used this against the Israeli Navy and sank one of their destroyers in the Mediterranean. You know the Israeli reaction? They disbanded their navy. They are very quick at action, very firm. They realize that they have no competition against such a boat. And retiring their navy, they went in, that's another story, for 4 La Combattante missile boats of French origin. And they stole them. They paid for it, but the French put a ban on it, but Israelis managed. Now they have their, what shall I say? How can you steal French boats from Bordeaux into the Atlantic, go around Gibraltar, go through Mediterranean to Israel, pass south of France? Obviously there were French people helping them, but I won't go into that. The point I am trying to make is that Pakistan Navy was a little slow. But there again, to be fair to them, I know I spoke to Admiral Muzaffar, we had family relationships. I spent 71 war, half of the time in the naval headquarters. So when I told him that, sir, look, we have this report given to you beforehand, how the hell could you have ships outside? He got angry. He picked up his hat and he said, Tariq, follow me. This is sitting in Napier Barracks. His staff was surprised. A civilian here talking like this to our admiral. Acha ji. He went straight for the car. He didn't even wait for the chaprasi and bag and usual stuff. Driver go, Clifton. So we drove to Clifton. There was a bungalow and obviously people there, civvies, but you could see that they were servicemen in disguise. This was a Navy safe house. Went in and there was a empty room with a huge table and a model, a harbor's model. He said, Tariq, this is Oka, India's, Gujarat, the nearest port to Pakistan, Oka port. And he said, look, these are the missile jetties. We have latest information, they are incomplete. How did they launch OSA boats from there? You see, that's where the Navy went wrong. They thought that if the jetties were not ready, the Indians will not be able to deploy these missiles in time. What the Indians did was they towed these boats out of Bombay, which was out of reach, and all day they would tow the boat up, and by evening they would be outside Karachi and let the boat now go and do its job. So, anyway, the first attack was very successful. The Pakistan Navy lost their ships. But then SUPARCO, me and Salim Mahmood, we proposed that within 2 days in the shipyard, we will make radar reflectors, about 6 foot diameter steel structures, simple, and haul them on fishing boats. So 50 fishing boats, haul these up. In 2 days we made them, and they were deployed so that if the OSA boats come again, instead of a few ships as targets, they will see 50 targets staring back. You understand? And now the missile would be confused. Now we don't know whether the Indians came again or not. But we never lost. And there was a report after the war on the Indian side which said that they did mount a second attack, but no details were given and they returned. So whatever it was, this SUPARCO managed to help the Pakistan Navy. Pakistan Navy was very generous. They made both Salim and myself honorary commanders, which we still are, you see. But they made use of us. How? And this, I cannot get over it. Few years later, I think 73, Navy wanted to choose between Exocet missile and Automat. These are two anti-ship missiles, both of Italian. Exocet is French origin. And there was an Automat trial being held in Sardinia. And do you know the Navy nominated myself and Salim to visit the Sardinia and give a report, and there was no naval officer. So that meant that we had, SUPARCO had earned the confidence of the Navy that we could deliver. Which I must say that in these 10 years, nobody from the Army, Navy, Air Force ever visited SUPARCO, because somehow the defense never had confidence among the civil scientists. Well, I won't go into that, but with the nuclear program, of course, things have become different. Now, Pakistan, if we have done something good, the scientists have delivered and they have shown that they can do the job if proper support is provided. So, out of that trial, again, there was no naval officer. We wrote a report and the Navy selected the Exocet for being put on their helicopters. And now when they had this Sea King helicopters with an Exocet, Pakistan Navy was unbeatable, at least in the Karachi region. Now no missile boat could dare approach because this was the best defense. A missile boat cannot hit a helicopter, while a helicopter with an Exocet can play games with these missile boats. Now, I was in Paris, but how did I sort of gain all this knowledge, you see? This is what I did, that apart from doing the SUPARCO's rocket project, I approached all the defense firms of Europe on an embassy letterhead that I am interested in visiting you. They were very glad. Every one of these firms opened them up. So I could manage to visit them on my own over this period of time. It was my, if you like, hobby. So that gave me that kickstart which later on helped me in defense production, you see. That Air Marshal Noor Khan visited Paris, and after visiting Hotchkiss brand, the 2.75-inch rocket for the Mirage, I had a project ready. But Noor Khan said, "Young man, I have no time." This was soon after 65. And I can understand. I mean, his job was to keep the Air Force ready. He was not interested in local production, you see. But unless you think long term, you are aware, Air Marshal, that unless you plan ahead, you see. So he said, "Sir, how many do you need?" "I will get 10,000 ready-made and the rest we will manufacture in the country." He said, "Young man, I need 30,000. He wanted his stocks full. So Air Force lost that opportunity. Subsequently, I remember, I think it was Air Commodore Shirwani at one time in the 70s. He came up with this plan of manufacture. But by that time, the license fee asked by Hotchkiss was 3 times. So this was interesting for me, but more important, it later on helped me when I was moved to defense production. Now, for SUPARCO, There was the Sonyani range. You can sort of see it over there. And then we built the plant at Moripur. And along with that, an instrumentation laboratory, which would specialize in communications and payloads, as well as guidance and control work would begin. And I think the lab is, I guess it's still there, the instrumentation lab. Also, we built SPARCENT, Space Research Center, next to Karachi University. Not just a range, but for satellite work, to study. Satellites give you a capability to look out as well as look down. That's very important. A satellite looking down on Earth gives you all kinds of capability. There is communication capability. We don't have the time to go into it. But most important is Earth Resources Satellite. And then this is 1967. You will remember Pakistan had devastating floods and Sindh was inundated. Southern Punjab was inundated. Sindh, that the river Indus had broken its barriers. Luckily, the barrage was still saved. And the normal custom was for the authorities to write to DC, who asked the Patwaris to send a report, which takes a month, and these are all subjective reports. This time around, we had an idea, and from SPARCENT, we wrote to NASA. Pakistan had no capability, but we were friendly with NASA, so we requested them to give us photographs of the area. They said, sorry buddy, we are willing to cooperate, but our last pass of the satellite was 7 days ago. So I remember then I said, why not, let's at least get that 7 days old picture. And that pictures, when they arrived, just opened our eyes. We couldn't believe it. The traces of the moisture in the soil was still there. You could see it like you were up in the plane and seeing. And we put that mosaic on the wall. I wish I could get hold of a picture from SUPARCO. It was eye-opening. In one go, you could see the damage, where the water had gone, where it had receded. So it was visible proof of the effectiveness and strength of this method. So I hope, and I'm sure, that SUPARCO has maintained that, expanded it in different fields, and that would have paid volumes to the country. Another application I remember, we could do it even then, was the snowfall on the Himalayas. Now, meteorological department has their sites, they can get information, but how much snow has fallen on K2, who can tell? Really, historical information is there, but you don't know this season how. But a satellite supported with ground studies, that is important. You can develop a model, and that was done in cooperation with meteorology, that we could work out relatively in a certain season how the snowfall. And why is that important, whether so many feet of snow falls or not? Because Pakistan depends on their dams, Tarbela, Mangla, etc. And these dams have a system of operating. They need to know how much water to expect, because if there is too much water coming, you lower the dam water so that it has a shock absorbing capacity. Otherwise, there will be flooding in the dam itself. So, if you don't know the system, then you will empty it in anticipation, but there will be no water. So you will lose that capacity. So through this mechanism of getting a better estimate, a few percent better estimate of snowfall in the Himalayas, I don't have the figure, but I'm sure can save you millions and millions of rupees. So the amount, the effort spent on these Earth resources satellites, communication satellites, I think personally I feel SUPARCO has done well in concentrating on this rather than a moon program or a Mars program. If you can afford it, that's good. India, best of luck to them. They've done an excellent job. But for Pakistan to spend that kind of a money, you can see it's out of our reach, and we should accept these things. This is Apollo 17 teams. This was the last American Apollo group. And well, these are just some of the old. In 74, just before 74, something else happened because of my familiarity with defense, unusual. There was this Ramazan war, Egypt, Syria versus Israel, when the Suez Canal was taken back by the Arabs. They were euphorious. And you will be happy to know the first military delegation who landed in Egypt to study the results of the war was Pakistani. And I was the only civilian member in that 6 or 7 member delegation. It was Army, Air Force, Navy, all that. But I was picked up because of what we have served the Navy. And that was valuable because we learned about SAM 2, SAM 3, SAM 4. You know, there was a whole range of SAMs. I can't help, I'm laughing. In Jordan, I had the habit of bringing my diary, and the person addressing us was a general of the Jordanian army. He was then a vice chief. And he said that I was commanding the Jordanian division during war, a few months before. And I was asking him how effective was SAM 2, SAM 3, Shilka guns, etc., etc. You know, these are anti-aircraft systems. And from Pakistan's angle, I wanted to know. So he said, look, we were on the front, and one day things were quiet. So I asked my staff officer, and he said, sir, a report has come in from our battery A that they have shot down an Israeli plane. And shortly after, battery B said, we have shot down an Israeli. And third report came from the Shilka position guns. They said, we have shot down an Israeli plane. So he said, because there was little activity, I asked my staff officer that will he go at the suspected place and see what is reality, because there was no activity that day. And he said, shortly the report came in. Said it is not an Israeli plane, they've shot down their own Jordanian plane. So he said, now I said, ask which battery did that, A, B or C. And everybody said, sir, we have no idea. We didn't even fire anything. So in other words, you know, the information you get during war, and especially in this kind of a situation, is not reliable. Little Hart, the famous British war commentator, he said, we have found after analysis after the war that own claims should be divided by half, enemy claims and own claims should be doubled. Yani, that will give you a better idea of what is real. So in 74, when Bhutto Sahib came, had taken power, he was, and you remember Gaddafi's visit, Lahore Stadium, and those speeches, 2 decisions were taken. One was that in Ministry of Defence they will create a defence production division. And secondly, that Pakistan would be made arsenal of Islam. We will set up plants in all fields. This new division had to be beefed up, you see. So I was moved from SUPARCO, taken as OSDJS to defence production. And more importantly, Abbas Khalili, the well-known ICS officer who had retired, was made chairman of the Defence Production Board. And then Aziz Ahmad was the foreign minister and defense minister. So we visited Libya, had long follow-up discussions with not Gaddafi Sahib himself, but his chief of staff. And we made out a list of 19 projects, which will, over a few years, they slate, and that was put in my charge. It would have covered aircraft manufacture, ships, submarines, everything. We made and these were licensed foreign technologies, because you cannot wait to develop your own. The best course is you take licenses and then go on from there, you see. Unfortunately, this never materialized because the Libyans insisted. They said money is not the problem. Billions of dollars, yes. But the plants should be put up in Libya. Now both Aziz Ahmad and Abbas Khalili said, that's impossible. They said, why? But we need skilled people, we need supervisors. He said, how many? 100,000? We'll pay for all that. But Pakistan side felt that that was not practical. And the foreign license holders, they also did not agree. They said, you put up plants in Pakistan, we are willing. But to put up plants in Libya, sorry, our governments will not allow. So that project. But the time I spent with, those Aziz Ahmad, Abbas Khalili, Ghulam Ishaq, they were people of high caliber. You really learnt. They were mentors, you see. So after retirement from government service in '94, I was taken on by the World Bank to advise the government of Pakistan, because at that time I was in Privatization Commission. So first as advisor on privatization and secondly on making a technology policy for Pakistan. And maybe Rastgar Sahab will remember that policy was written out, but it was never completed and implemented. And those are long stories. But here is, I was the chairman of the Board of Governors of the Asia Pacific Center. So the mechanisms were there. The United Nations was willing and capable of helping, but unfortunately we in government of Pakistan could not make full use of these things. I remember Nyerere, he headed from Tanzania, he headed the South Commission, and the South Commission wrote a 1-inch thick volume on the development, best way to develop the developing countries. And Manmohan Singh was the Secretary General of that committee. At that time, this was 90s, I tried to find out where that South Commission report was in government of Pakistan. No ministry had heard of it. Finally we found that dozens of them were lying in a bookshelf of Planning Commission, gathering dust. While India was the only country which benefited from that, because Manmohan Singh was the Secretary General of that committee and he became Prime Minister of India and he had written the report. So that's how, if India has gone ahead, way ahead of us, there are good reasons for that. These are the mentors. These are my meetings. This is the Chinese Defense Minister. I forget his name, Marshall. Remember, notice no ranks. At that time Mao had passed away, but these were 80s. They were still not wearing. 70s and 80s. This is the Iranian Rafsanjani. We were trying to sell sugar plants from the Ministry of Production. That's the recognition. I must say, the country gave us lots. My dreams came true. I wanted to see the world. I wanted to learn technology. I wanted to compete with these. We got all the opportunities, but unfortunately, the end product is not what we were hoping for. So, I tried to promote sports for the disabled. So this is the Pakistan National Paralympic Committee. And we could manage, this is in China, Asian Games, Paralympic Games. And Pakistan has fully participated in these 5 international Paralympic Games. These are like the Olympic Games. These are full-fledged. After every Olympics, 2 weeks after that, there is a Paralympic Olympics. And this is the result. And Pakistan has a haul of medals. So this is not the Special Olympics. Special Olympics is like an honorary body. This is highly competitive. In fact, the athletes here have to be examined. There is a full medical report given before they are classified. So before you go there, you have to go through a classification process. And Pakistan now has a world-level athlete from Gujranwala, Haider Ali, in discus throw. We are hoping that he'll be able to, he has won the medals, but he can break the world record. We hope. My interest has shifted from technology into this area now. What is the future of humankind? And this is a small booklet I've written in response to the new atheists, Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, Neil deGrasse Tyson, he's alive, all 3. And they're good intellectuals, but unfortunately they are secularists, and they are saying there is no God, religion is meaningless, get away from it, and we should go to reason and not revelation. And here I have tried to show that yes, reason is very powerful, and we must have reason, but if you use it in the proper way, you will see that science and reason and revelation go together. So that will need another presentation, but one humankind without borders, living under one constitution. If we do not accept that, which is a secular viewpoint, we will continue to have Ukraines and Palestines and so on. The only way, look, this is the space age. And for space age, satellites accept no borders. Is that not a fact? Internet accepts no borders. And we insist on Durand lines. I don't know. But I draw your attention that herein lies the answers, and we should stop thinking. And if we do that, then not just this earth, but the solar system and maybe the galaxy can be our target. We can thrive, not just survive as a human race. Thank you. Finally, the answer lies here, ji. Revelation. And revelation based, in my book, I have tried to show. There was a Professor Raman in America, a friend of mine. We were together in a meeting, and he has given a review. He says that I have very effectively thrown the ball back in their court, based on reason, not faith, not blind faith. I don't believe in that. Reason will tell you. Look, I ask you a simple question. You drive on the right side of the road in Americas, you drive on the left side of the road in the British Commonwealth, right? No problem. You follow the rule of that country. But tell me, when you are in a ship, Can you have two laws? When you are in the air, can you have two laws? The answer is no. Technology has advanced to the level that you can no longer sustain this artificial concept of borders and religions and capitalism and socialism. There has to be one set of laws, one constitution. Humans are one brotherhood, sisterhood. Humankind, we are 99.9% the same. Only the pigment is black or white. Everything else. But why don't we accept it? This is the simple argument. How can you do? And for that, I am afraid men and women will never agree unless there is a higher power. And in any case, all your highfalutin sciences, can it tell us what happens after death? I am now knocking on that. So the question is very important for me. What happens when you put me into the grave? Can any scientist, any of these high intellectuals give you the answer? People have tried. This near-death experiences is, yes, there is something in it, but we don't know what it is. That can only come, and a warning is, not only you have been told what that evolutionary life future is, you've been told how to make success of it. We should be grateful. Thank you.